Hello and welcome to Will It Roll. This week's theme is race cars, however I'm going to start with the Lotus Elise, and on the first run I completely missed the corner. This car was more twitchy than I seem to remember. Anyway, some of you might remember a few days ago Daniel issued me the challenge while we were playing a game of tag, in fact, to try and roll his favourite 99 Elise. Now this car here is completely standard and you would expect it to be fairly difficult to roll. It is after all a very small, very low, very lightweight British sports car. However, it does have an awful lot of grip, and on the first time that I actually hit the curb I managed to roll it, and wheelie, very impressive wheelie, and landed. So there we go, the 99 Elise, very straightforward to roll. I suspect that is down to the fact that it has humongous levels of grip. That's the only reason I can sort of explain why that one there is so straightforward. So we're going to move on to race cars, and to carry on the theme of annoying Daniel, I'm going to use all of Daniel's favourite race cars. So up first it is the McLaren MP4-12C GT3, because that name didn't have enough letters and numbers in it in the first place. This is it's a DLC car for Forza. It's a race car that I quite like and can't get stopped. Maybe I've clattered the wall. I quite like the McLaren actually. It's quite a nice car to drive. Now the advantage with using race cars is that they do have very good brakes. So when you do inevitably get onto two wheels around here, which McLaren was doing a little bit, you can sort of almost get them stopped. That was very close. Although of course then on the other hand they are very fast. As far as rolling them goes, they're race cars. They are very low to the ground, they are very wide, they have lots of downforce, which makes it difficult. However, they do have a lot of grip, and it seems to be the fact that a car that has a lot of grip is fairly easy to roll. I'm not really sure why. Anyway, after trying with a standard car, you won't do it. The setups are too good on them. So I had to go to the tuning shop. There's no need for upgrades on these cars this week because they already come with all the parts you could need. So it was to the tuning shop, and with the McLaren it was raised ride height and stiffened springs to try and get it to roll over. On the first attempt it wasn't looking particularly promising, as it didn't really do very much. I wasn't resorting to camber yet. That's kind of like a last ditch effort. If it isn't working, anything isn't working. However, on the second attempt, there goes the McLaren, and it did a kind of barrel rolly and landed on its wheels, and there we go, it's parked. It was fairly straightforward, really. I mean, the second attempt with the upgrades, I spent about 10 minutes trying to do it standard. You know, fairly straightforward to roll a race car, which is not what people expect. We move on next to, well, we had to include this. This is the V8 Supercar. V8 Supercars, for those of you who haven't seen it, is the greatest form of motorsport known to man. I really recommend you watch it if you can. It's really hard to find it on TV in England, but it's a fantastic race series, and the cars are amazing. I'm using the Holden for this, as you can see. It's going a little bit on two wheels. This is standard again, because normally when I do V8 Supercar stuff I use a Ford, so it's going to be different. So I'm using James Courtney's Holden. This is from a few years ago. Amazingly, Courtney got on the podium. What was going on in the last race that I saw? As far as rolling this car goes, yeah, it was better than the McLaren. It was looking more promising than the McLaren. It doesn't have as good brakes, so it didn't stop before hitting the wall. The one problem with the V8 Supercars is they are incredibly fast. They are very leery, which is part of the fun of them. But yeah, it wasn't really going to get stopped. Again, rolling this thing standard, I don't think you'll do it. I mean, it is a little bit higher than the McLaren, a little bit less downforce, but it's still a race car, still very low to the ground. It actually has less grip than the McLaren, so that will make it harder. Now, I wanted to try and, since this car was getting sort of more on two wheels than anything else, I wanted to kind of try to do this with the minimum amount of tuning. So this is just with raised ride height. The suspension, everything else is still exactly the same. It's just the ride height that is raised. Now, the problem with that is that these cars are all already difficult enough to drive as it is. When you raise the ride height, it makes it an absolute handful. And actually just trying to hit the curb was proving a little bit difficult because it's terrible to drive. Also, when you do hit the curb, it still wasn't doing a huge amount as I fire myself into the tyre bundle again. Yeah, these cars are not easy things to drive. We've often said, actually, here that if you want to learn sort of throttle control, then turn traction control off and try and drive one of these, because they are absolutely mental things to try and drive. I carried on for a while. This was the longest of all of the cars it took to try and roll, probably because I was using the minimum amount of tuning parts on them. It took a while to get this thing to do anything. A lot of that, though, was down to the fact that I kept missing the blooming curb because it was such a handful to get through the corners. You just didn't have as much turning as you were expecting with it. But it's still, it was a bit, still there, I will speak English in a minute. There we go. My brain has just recovered itself. Yes, eventually it was rolled. That's a pretty spectacular flip there from the Holden, and now it's sat on the roof and the spoiler's missing. Yeah, again, I mean, it wasn't the hardest thing in the world to roll. My brain has just failed me today. English is not appearing. Yeah, this isn't the easiest thing in the world to roll, however it wasn't the hardest of all the cars. It was very difficult to drive. It's probably one of the hardest cars to drive with the silly suspension kind of stuff on it. I don't know why. I think it's probably because it's just a hard thing to drive anyway. Anyway, we go back to sort of Daniel's favourite racing cars with the Radical. This is an incredibly fast, incredibly grippy car. It's insanely good from the corners. Top speed isn't particularly spectacular, but it's ridiculously high amounts of grip on this thing. As far as rolling it goes, well, it was always going to be tricky because it is so low to the ground, as you can see. So just getting it to lift a wheel off the curb was proving difficult. When it did lift a wheel off the curb, it just kind of span. Not sure why that is particularly. Yeah, it's a funny one with this. But yeah, that's kind of like the best sort of that I was getting it to do. It's very, very hard to kind of recover it though. Once it went onto two wheels, the car just wanted to kind of spin, which wasn't particularly helpful. I tried for a few minutes with this car. It was very apparent that it wasn't going to roll. I think that might have been the best attempt I had. And you can see the minute it lands, it doesn't know quite what to do, and then you have a big crash. So yeah, rolling this standard off a curb, you're not going to do it. Mate, as I've said with these cars before, maybe you'll roll them handbraking on the grass, but I think that's a bit cheaty. So it was to the tuning shop with the Radical. I tried this with just raised suspension, but that didn't work. So it's got stiffened suspension as well. Ignore the fact that it's now kind of changed paint job. This is the one that I had in my garage, and I forgot to take the livery off it. First attempt on the curb, and I missed it completely. I completely clattered it. Got quite a lot of airtime though. I also love how these cars have so much grip. When you watch them coming down there, it looks like the replay sped up because they change direction so fast. Same with this in the car that will be on next. It looks really, really twitchy. Second attempt, and I missed the curb again. Still getting a fairly impressive amount of airtime, and didn't manage to stop it before the tyre wall, and managed to clatter that and have another spin. I spent a lot of time facing the wrong way in this car. So third attempt, I was determined to get it this time and missed the curb again completely. Again, this is another kind of, the handling was a bit wonky now I'd messed about with the suspension, also me just being terrible. So I wasn't particularly happy at this point, and I was going back. I wanted to kind of film it going the other direction to this because it's better for camera angles, but since I was going back I thought I'd hit the curb anyway, and from a slow speed it rolled. So the trick with this car was to go a little bit slower so that you don't have the terrible handling to worry about. Again, fairly straightforward to roll this when it's upgraded. I'm pretty sure the first time I rolled a car around Sunset was a tuned Radical, because yeah, these things got so much grip that if you touch that curb with the sort of messed about suspension, it kind of flips them over. Now, our final car is the Mazda 787B. A lot of people wanted to see me try and roll a prototype car. I have actually rolled, what was it, a Porsche Spider something or other. I rolled in like the second ever video we did of this. But I'm going to have a go with the Mazda, the most fantastic sounding car in Forza, or one of the most fantastic sounding. This is unsurprisingly very difficult to roll standard. Very similar to the Radical, really. I mean, this is much faster in a straight line, but these cars are fairly similar otherwise. Lots and lots of grip, incredibly low to the ground. When you do lift a wheel off the ground, if you can keep control of it, it normally has a spin, or in that case, it just ran out of road and found a tyre wall. Yeah, rolling this thing standard is never going to happen. It's too sort of low to the ground. I was having the most luck off that second kind of curve. However, I was having big crashes as well because, as I said, once it lifts the wheel off the ground, when it lands, sorry, from being in the air, it's just not controllable at all and will find something to hit or spin. I did manage to roll it standard, but it was a cheaty roll. I was going so fast around that corner, I couldn't get it stopped in time. Bounced off the tyre wall, and it's now on its roof, but that's a cheaty roll. That doesn't count. You can roll anything by crashing it, so you'll eventually kind of find a way onto its roof. So, it was to the tuning shop. The suspension was raised and stiffened, and that didn't do anything at all, so I had to put some negative camber on it as well. The reason why you don't see these ones that do nothing at all is because A, I don't bother saving the replay. Also, they're done in test drive, so I can't actually save the replay. Also, it's boring because you've already seen it not do very much. So with the camber, it was the first attempt that it managed to roll on, skidded a good 100 metres down the road on its roof before righting itself, and parked perfectly for the camera. So there we go. I've managed to roll lots of race cars. Race cars really aren't that hard to roll. All you have to do is raise the suspension, and because there is so much speed and so much grip, just throw it at the curb and they will roll. You can stick negative camber on it if it's struggling to roll with this Mazda, and that will make them roll even easier. You might get away with just one of the sort of things. You might get away with just stiffened suspension or just raised suspension, but that's quite difficult with these cars, as I proved with the V8 Supercar. However, that is it for this video, guys, so thank you very much for watching. As ever, if you would like to leave themes and that sort of thing in the comments section, I will have a look through for the next Will It roll, and I will pick my favourite. However, until next time, goodbye.